Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today we reach out to Abhijit Iyer Mitra on his views on the ongoing testimony that has been happening in the United States on the Kashmir issue, with all parties being heard. And we saw some very interesting video segments, clips, wherein a certain congresswoman, I shall not name her, I'll leave it for Abhijit, has been making some very one-sided remarks. I don't know if it is ignorance or hubris or what else, but there is certainly there was a ganged effort to try and ambush this. And what is a purely internal matter of India is being dragged out in the open. Very regrettable. To know more about this, let's join Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Abhijit, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thanks for having me. A pleasure as always, Sri. You're going to see the kids running around behind me and in front of me, so they love the camera.
That's fine. He looks like his master's voice. That's the cute dog that used to be there.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
He does.
So you have at least some strong supporters by your side. So
yes,
anytime a US politician comes to make a stand, you'll see 6 people standing behind as if show of support, right? So you have at least one. So that's a good going.
I have 2.
Yes.
One's down here, one's behind me here.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, there were several things that were interesting about all of this. First is the fact that they get 2 people with zero credibility on Kashmir. Nitasha Kaul hasn't even been to Kashmir since Article 370 was abrogated. And she's a classic one with a Stockholm syndrome. Angana Chatterjee, forget about having not even gone to Kashmir. The woman got sacked. Both her and her husband got sacked from their previous jobs for the climate of fear and intimidation they introduced, failing in their academic duties, financial misappropriation, lying, harassment of students and whatnot. This was the caliber of, I'm sorry to use this word, but rubbish that Congress sought fit to represent the Pakistani viewpoint. Then we have on the other side, first, let's be clear about this. If any Indian American wanted proof that the Democrats have moved decisively against Indian Americans and pro-Pakistani, just go watch that thing. There was not one Democrat out there who acquitted themselves with any level of fairness. Maybe the one point of fairness that came was in terms of Brad Sherman admitting that when he had said reporters aren't being allowed into Kashmir, and Aarti Tikku Singh corrected him, he actually admitted the correction and made the record reflect that. But here's the point. The anti-lobby, this wasn't about human rights in South Asia. It was about Muslim rights in South Asia. And excesses by Muslims were completely ignored. The one person that was talking about it, Muslim on Muslim violence, which was Gul, I forget her name now. She was the only one. She didn't get an opportunity to talk. Aarti Tikku Singh didn't get an opportunity to talk. Everything was these 2 clowns, Nitasha and Angana Chatterjee. Now, let's look at Ilhan Omar's own record here, that this woman is a toxic jihadist. And I use that term, that is my academic opinion, that she is a toxic jihadist. She has been associated with CAIR, you know that well, and you all know how dodgy CAIR is.
Yes.
She has traveled on behalf of CAIR to meet Erdogan, and notice she never ever criticizes Erdogan. She's never criticized ISIS or the Kurds or Al-Qaeda operating out of Turkish territory. In her Washington Post editorial, she actually says, we should not impose sanctions on Turkey. These are counterproductive. They will not work. And she just says ISIS. She doesn't say terrorist, ISIS, terrorist, ISIS. It's like the UN. It's like the World Food Program. It's like WWF that saves pandas. It's another, cute little thing called ISIS. And Turkey-backed rebels. Can you beat that? Al-Qaeda, which went and raped and horrifically tortured that Kurdish counselor lady, is Turkey-backed rebels. That's it. This woman is a classic normalizer of terrorism. She's called for, she's been associating with the family of that lady Hoda, I forget the last name now, in Egypt, who's a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a designated terrorist organization in several countries. She goes to any extent to normalize this kind of rubbish. The problem, of course, is that she has a whole set of fan brigades, and Trump is going to do nothing about it, because as long as Trump wants to win, his surest guarantee of winning is Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar's ability to rub people off the wrong way is going to ensure a Trump victory in 2020.
Well, she also has Rashida Tlaib on her side. She also spouts off nonsense. And there's also two other people who are wittingly or unwittingly playing into these shark-infested waters. I'm going to take some names here. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and AOC. My God, people that are not fit to probably run for council have become congressmen and congresswomen. They don't seem to have the gravitas of the power they hold in their hands. They seem to be just spouting off nonsense. It's very, very regrettable. I am witness to some of these most uncongressional type of comments, all of them coming from Democrats. And I don't know what Nancy Pelosi is up to. She's a headmistress in this case. She needs to take care of all these things and make sure that there are no self goals from within. And otherwise, Democrats are going to give it away on a platter. But on a different note, Abhijit, you were in Kashmir for some time. You looked at the ground situation yourself. Now, recently, what we have been seeing is, in fact, PGurus wrote about this. We said that some of the apples are being plucked and then brought out from the valley to help the farmers. And then we saw a couple of killings, unfortunately, associated with that. So they are going after softer targets. So what is your read on the Kashmir situation? And we want to know the truth. You can tell it the way you saw it.
Sure. Now, look, where or are there going to be human rights abuses by Indian forces? Yes, absolutely. We're a third world country, and the definition of a third world country is low investment in human capital, which means you can't keep monitoring your troops all the time. They're not the best trained troops, and human rights violations are going to happen. The difference is it is not a crime of commission, it is a crime of omission in this case, right? Also, please note, every time one of these crimes happens, the army takes their own to task. There have been at least 36 cases, if I remember right, of convictions by the army through court martials of army people who have committed human rights violations and things like that. Number one. Number two, what has been happening now is slightly different. What they're doing is they're keeping one Jammu and Kashmir policeman with one CRPF policeman at every post. And each post is within 100 to 200 meters of each other, within eyeball distance. So what happens is each soldier or policeman basically has 5 other people watching him. 2 more, say I'm a Jammu Kashmir policeman, there are 2 more Jammu Kashmir policemen watching me, and there are 3 CRPF, including my own CRPF buddy watching me at the moment. So this acts as a significant way of controlling any kind of excesses, right? Now, in spite of that, may excesses happen? Yes. Have they happened? No. Let's be absolutely clear about that. Because the only picture of torture that we have had is that same thing that's come out from that clown of an AFP reporter, Uzair Rizvi or something like that. The same thing that the Independent put out. The same thing that, who was it, BBC or The Guardian? It's four channels have put that out so far, And it's just, if there's so much human rights abuse happening, statistically, you tell me, is it possible that that all these 4 different newspapers and news organizations can only find the exact same person with a dubious story that simply can't be traced back properly? I doubt that very much. So this is another thing. Third, we need to remember that the people that are forcing the Kashmiris to shut down their shops. Now, is there anger? Yes. But remember, at some point, anger and, the need to survive, the need to make money to survive, at some point, your tummy, your hunger overcomes your anger. So they're all desperate to get back to business. And the people preventing them from opening their shops is less so terrorists. It's much more so the PDP and National Conference goons. It's Omar Abdullah's thugs and Mehbooba Mufti's thugs, in this case controlled by her daughter Irtija, who's going around pretending to be some human rights activist. but they're the ones that are controlling these thugs, we think, or remote control, but then they could be operating independently as well. And what is amazing about Srinagar is that the shops that are open 24, for normal periods of time, are the ones that are closest to Jammu Kashmir Police and CRPF pickets, which tells you what? Clearly, they're not afraid of the CRPF and police. But then you go ask them, they'll say, "Nahi, saab, ye police ne curfew laga ke rakha hai." I'm like, dude, you're standing in front of a CRPF picket and you're telling me there's a curfew. I've seen you since the morning you've kept open, but you don't challenge them. A good journalist never challenges his subject. You just listen and you work out the logical fallacies yourself, because the contradictions start coming out. Next, fourth, apples. Now remember, there are two sets of harvest. One happens in early September, which is of the Kulu apples. They're called Kulu. The second harvest happens around October 5th, which is the delicious and the Maharaji. And October the 5th is a very specific kind of harvest, because in either very early October or late September, you need to have a shower that hydrates the apples again and makes them crunchy and firm. So what had happened was that by the time I got there in late September, the Kulu crop had been completely evacuated. There were no losses. They had all been very, very silently evacuated by truck and things like that, under the cover of darkness, in hiding and all of that. But they had been evacuated, right? The second, and this is when, if you remember, this poor farmer was shot through the knee. He was kneecapped, and his daughter was also wounded in that, because they wanted to intimidate these guys that you can't sell all of this. And this was actually terrorists doing it. But then the second thing was that when this latest, the Maharaji and the delicious season comes on, they've actually killed quite a few people. They've also killed people in the stone crushing and brick kiln business, the drivers and truck drivers, because they realize that if they start killing Kashmiris, then the tide turns against them, kind of. But the problem here is that both in the national media and in the international media, you will have people that just ignore the killing of Kashmiris by terrorists. It's only when the which is not bad per se, because a state needs to be held to a higher standard of account than a terrorist. That said, stop doing propaganda for them, because all these things like Al Jazeera and BBC do is end up doing propaganda for these guys, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Take one particular example, this Hussein Uzair Rizvi guy, particularly toxic fellow, works for AFP, claims to be a checker, wouldn't know facts if it hit him in the face, selectively takes pictures, selectively curated pictures to present a complete propaganda image. And, it tells you a lot about the Indian state that we're not cracking down on this, because our thing is, you want to go take pictures, go take pictures. But, the point is, if you're some kind of white chap or white lady going there to take a foreign correspondent going there to, act smart, don't come back to us and then say, oops, I got kidnapped and shit like that. Because, security is important. We can't invest the amount of resources in foreign journalists at the moment to keep you safe, because we've got better things to do with our time.
So the hard fact is that there has been hardly a whimper for the kind of outrage that has been portrayed outside of the Kashmir Valley. And now the cell phones are also enabled, maybe not for internet, but you can make normal phone calls using cell phones now. So that hasn't really caused any ripples, has it?
Look, it's not easy managing without cell phones, because once cell phones and data come, your life is so dependent on it. You feel completely immobilized without it. You feel lost without it, because it's almost reflex reaction that you want to go check your Twitter or check your WhatsApp or whatever, things like that. But the landlines were there. Was there difficulty? Yes, because how many people remember a landline number anymore?
Right.
I mean, I don't even have a landline at home. I've got high-speed Wi-Fi and I've got a mobile phone. Who puts a landline in their house anymore?
Right.
So there were little things like that probably should have been thought out better. And see, here it was a case of balancing out tactical objectives with strategic objectives, because all the senior officers I spoke to, were like, look, this is costing us intelligence. because every time a terrorist used to come stay in a local house, the moment he leaves the house, it's usually the local guy who calls up the police and says, guys, this notorious terrorist has left my house, come kill him, and don't forget to bring the reward money for me, right? And yeah, it's the truth. I mean, Jammu Kashmir police will tell you that 90% of the people they catch are from human intelligence. It's usually the house owner that dobs in the terrorists staying with them. After they leave, never when they're in the house, because they don't want a shooting incident happening in their own house, A. B, the other set of people that I interviewed were the ordinary Jammu Kashmir cops and the CRPF, who were very happy with the blackout, because their thing was, abhi to kaam karne ke liye kuch bhi nahi hai. They were just completely relaxed, no fingers on triggers or anything like that. In fact, they'd strung their guns over their shoulder, because they weren't even carrying it in a sort of ready pose kind of thing, because their thing was, look, there's been no stone pelting, there's been no nothing. If stone pelting happens, it's just one or two kids who come and throw stones away and then run away in the other direction. So clearly at a tactical level, operational level, it's working well, but at a strategic intelligence gathering level, it's probably not the best thing to do. But anyway, now that's being sorted out. So let's see what happens.
Now, when a terrorist comes and takes up residence in a certain person's home, there's a lot of damage inflicted on that house. The girls there are not safe. This is what I heard. I don't know how true this is, but and essentially the terrorists act as if they own the place, they own the members, and all sorts of atrocities get committed. Is that still happening in your opinion?
So that's no, that's not true, because the houses that are selected are usually sympathizers that are very carefully screened and picked up in advance. It's not people going and saying, smashing down a door saying we're going to stay here, you're going to give us a refuge for the evening, and so on and so forth, because payments and things like that are worked out very carefully in advance. So the family usually knows when a terrorist is coming over to their place and going to stay with them. There have been reported instances, no proof I might add, of sex hospitality being offered, where a father will offer his daughter or wife or something like that to these militants. Again, these are allegorical stories. We don't know if that's happened, though. I have heard some fairly. I've pieced together 2-3 different points of view from one particular house sometime back, which lead me to believe that this is in fact the case. But again, I can't prove it. And when they come, they are in fact looked after quite well. They behave themselves. Because remember, you can't stay in somebody's house that has a mobile phone, misbehave with him, and then not expect him to dob you into the cops. Invariably, he is going to dob you into the cops. That's a different matter, because he wants the money. He wants both the lakh and a half that the militants are offering you to stay, board and lodge, but then they also want the reward of 15-20 lakhs that the government is offering you. So, it's competing demands, and there's an element of truth to it. Yes.
But hold on, Abhijit. The terrorists also know that this person, told on them, and therefore the next time around there will be a price to pay for these posts, isn't it?
No. How are you going to tell on them? Who's going to tell them? Somebody could have seen you going through the field and reported you in. See, the problem is that the gathering of these terrorists happens in August, September, when the apple bushes and the pear bushes, because apple and pear trees, they're not very high. The foliage starts somewhere around this level. So when you're walking, it's very difficult to see. It's almost like it's not a rainforest, but it's difficult to see because it blocks off eye level communications. November is when fall starts and autumn starts and all the leaves start falling. So what happens is that is when tree cover is completely shorn, and that is when the police and the CRPF go militant hunting. And at that point, when you're leaving, you're taking extreme risk moving, because you're completely exposed to the security forces. So anybody can see you. And see, the problem here is, who's going to tell the Pakistani handlers that he was here when he got killed? Because, these are all worked out very, very carefully, that they're cooperative arrangements. They never put the militant up in the same house again and things like that. So you never know who's dubbed you in.
Interesting.
And here's the point. If you actually end up killing every house where you stayed, in the assumption that it was the owner that dobbed you in, who the hell will want to put you up in the first place?
I understand the difficulty. So hopefully the numbers of these terrorists is going down exponentially, I hope. I mean, anytime you'd ask, that people always say, oh, there are only 150 terrorists, and if they are taken care of, Kashmir Valley will be peaceful. Tell us the exact number in your opinion. Plus or minus 10 is fine. And so how many you think there are still there?
So right now, the estimate is between 35 to 45 who've been smuggled in. But remember, those Balakot strikes, they dealt a crippling blow to some of the terror organizations, right? Because terrorists aren't made overnight. There's a lot of training that goes into them, in terms of plotting the attack, in terms of code breaking, deciphering encrypted messages, how to get past security and all of that. It's human value addition. It's a very rigorous, it's almost like a commando training course in that sense, right? So these guys, they first of all, they have to come in here. They have to survive Indian troops looking for them and all of that. That requires a huge amount of skill. And what then happens is that 35 to 45 it's a fairly worrying number. I don't think we should take it too lightly. At the same time, that this does seem to be a rushed recruitment. It's because the 370 August 5th hit them like a bolt of lightning. None of their intelligence agencies were able to predict it. They don't know what to do. They've got very poor quality recruits that they're trying to push through. Those recruits aren't being able to come through, so they're actually dying in the border fire and all of that, because they don't know how to evade defenses. They don't know how to go under the defenses and so on and so forth. I think you will see a lot more terrorists being killed this season for one very simple reason, that they have not been trained properly.
Well, very interesting days ahead, but surely but slowly, the valley is returning to normalcy. Schools will be open, I guess, in the whole state. And I think by the end of October, things should come down to more normal state of affairs. And thank you very much, Abhijit, for sharing your thoughts on this rather thorny issue. Let's hope that this video lays to rest a lot of the false narratives that have been floating around outside of India, especially in the West. And I really hope that the likes of Brad Sherman and Ilhan Omar and Pramila Jaipal and Ro Khanna and all these congressmen, women, first of all, educate yourself about Kashmir before you open your mouth. Engage your brain first before you open your mouth. Thank you very much, Abhijit.